Hello, and welcome to this presentation on the TARC 2025 draft proposals. Today we're going to go through each of our draft proposals, and by the end of this conversation we would like to first of all refresh everyone's memory about TARC 2025, especially the what and the why. We want to review what's already happened so far in the project. We want to, most importantly, review the TARC 2025 draft plans. And then finally, we want to make sure that you know how to speak up and be involved in the process. Let's get started. To start out with, what is TARC 2025? TARC 2025 is a network redesign process. In a network redesign process, we consider changes to a transit network in terms of where bus lines start and end, how often they come, and what roads they travel on. This is something that many agencies do every couple of decades or so, but there's also an important reason that TARC is doing that besides our usual updating process, and that's on the fiscal cliff. Like many agencies, TARC is facing major financial challenges right now. Rising costs, reduced ridership, and especially the end of federal COVID-era emergency funding means that when TARC did our budget for the upcoming fiscal year, last spring, we projected a $30 million deficit by the end of 2026. What does that mean? That means without additional revenue or cuts to service, TARC would need to cut approximately 50% of fixed route service from where TARC was in the spring of 2024. That's a big amount, and that's not something that the TARC team can do by themselves. It's something that needs to be a community decision and conversation. So TARC launched TARC 2025 as the vehicle to have that conversation and determine community consensus on what our transit network should look like as we move forward. The first phase of the project was in summer 2024. Over August and September, TARC did 164 presentations and received over 2,800 surveys in response. We asked many questions during that process, but the key question was really around this core idea of ridership versus coverage. This is a key question because with limited resources, TARC needs clear guidance from the community on values and priorities. We can do many things, but we can't do everything. Ridership and coverage are two opposite ends of the spectrum. On one end of the spectrum, you have ridership. A ridership model provides useful service where you have the highest demand for transit so that many people can reach the most opportunities. For the Louisville region, this generally means denser areas inside the Waterson and towards major destinations like downtown or U of L. And it means providing frequency. Buses that come at least every 15 minutes. But the trade-off in a limited budget situation is that if you prioritize frequency, you can't cover everywhere that you currently cover. Coverage is the other end of the spectrum. In coverage, we think of transit more as a social service of last resort. When you prioritize coverage, you want to make sure that a transit agency goes everywhere that you might have, even a few people who might take the bus, and especially in TARC's situation, that we go everywhere that we go today. But the trade-off is that if you do that with a limited budget, you can't run the bus very often. Instead of having frequent service in your core areas, you'll have a bus that comes every 30, 60, 90, even 120 minutes. That means transit will not be useful to many people, and not many people will ride as they will not find it useful. But if they absolutely need a bus, one will be coming eventually to where they are. What we heard as we brought this to the community is that a larger number of Louisville region residents preferred frequency. It wasn't unanimous. There was a strong minority that was focused on the coverage situation. But by and large, the community in larger numbers said they wanted frequency. We also heard from TARC's Stakeholder Advisory Committee that's made up of community leaders from a variety of different areas and fields, that frequency was very important for TARC to preserve. So with that feedback, the TARC board directed the TARC planning team to prioritize ridership. Not completely, but to prioritize preserving a high frequency, high ridership core in TARC's main areas as we put together our draft proposals. And that's where we are today. TARC released draft plans on March 5th, and we are now gathering public input until April 30th. We have 3 plans that we've brought to the community. 2 of them are really more around short-term choices. These are our limited and our enhanced proposals. And then we also have a longer-term growth option for the system. We'll go into each of these plans now and give you some details on what might be in store for TARC and TARC riders if we were to look at those. Before we do that, though, it's important to take a quick look at our existing network to familiarize yourself with where TARC currently goes and how often and regularly we go to those places. You can figure that out from the map that's on your screen because it's color-coded by line depending on how often the bus comes along that particular line. If you're waiting for a bus at one of those lines colored red, that means you'd expect to see a bus every 15 minutes, or 4 buses an hour. But as you get into some of the other colors, especially green or gold, that means a bus line where the bus doesn't come very often. If you're waiting for the bus there, you can expect to see the bus mostly maybe once an hour, or maybe even once every 75 minutes or every 90 minutes. All right. So the first of our short-term plans that we want you to look at is called the limited plan. So the limited plan is a pretty stark further reduction in TARC service. It's a 29% reduction in service from what we have today, and what we have today is already at reduced service levels from where we were coming into 2024. What the limited plan primarily does is preserve the core high-frequency networks where we have a majority of TARC boarding today. So you see where the red lines are on your screen, that's along Broadway Bardstown, the Market Frankfort corridor, Dixie Highway, the 4th Street corridor, and the Preston Highway corridor. This is pretty much the frequent service that you see in the TARC network today, and the limited plan would preserve that, again preserving that high frequency service that is going to get the majority of TARC's existing riders to where they need to go both today and in the coming years. The problem with the limited plan, or the trade-off, is that as you get further out, you see significantly reduced coverage. So areas that TARC currently covers with service, places like Middletown, J-Town, parts of the south and southwest of Jefferson County, and a lot of southern Indiana, there just wouldn't be any TARC service like we have today. The benefit of implementing something like the limited plan is that TARC would be able to run the limited plan with existing resources well into the 2030s, maybe even a decade. Now, this is always something that may need to be reevaluated depending on the financial situation, but we know with a limited plan, or a plan that has service levels similar to a limited plan, that we would be able to see consistency and a minimum of changes to the network for a number of years. TARC, however, does not think that the limited plan is a good plan to go to. We think that the reductions are just too stark, would leave too many people without reliable transit service. TARC prefers, at this point, the enhanced plan over the limited plan for a short-term step forward. The enhanced plan would still be an overall reduced level of service, but not at the level of reductions that we would see in the limited plan. The enhanced plan, like the limited plan, would preserve core high-frequency network on the lines where we know we have the highest ridership for TARC services right now and the highest demand for destinations. So the Broadway Bardstown corridor, Market Frankfort, Dixie Highway corridor, the 4th Street corridor, and the Preston Highway corridor all preserve the level of high-frequency service that they have today. But in addition to preserving that, the enhanced plan also offers new and improved transit service. We would be able to see a crosstown line going from the West End down to Algonquin Parkway through U of L across Bardstown Road and over to Baptist East, providing really reliable, frequent, every 30-minute cross-town connections that would connect West End residents with jobs at Baptist Health, with healthcare, and with educational opportunities at U of L. We also would see, as we zoom out, a still a reduction of coverage compared to today, but at a far less level than we see at the limited plan. So we'd see more coverage restored, coverage like J-Town and areas of Shively that you wouldn't see in the limited plan would still receive service on the enhanced plan. Most importantly, the enhanced plan would allow TARC to serve every JCPS magnet high school with 30-minute frequent service at the AM and PM bell times. So this isn't something that would be able to replace yellow bus service, but would be an important added safety net for parents and students to be able to get to school on a regular basis. The TARC 2025 team did a lot of analysis to see what the outcomes might be for each of these networks, and you can see a little bit of that on your screen now. We looked at comparison in terms of overall coverage between today's network and between the limited and the enhanced network, and as you can see, there is a reduction of service of people who have access to some level of transit in both the limited and the enhanced network. You also see, though, for both the limited and the enhanced network, an increase in the amount of people who have access to reliable, frequent transit service, the kind of useful transit service that provides good access to jobs and education and can build ridership on a much stronger base than we have today. We also took a look throughout the region to see what the effects might be down to the census block level. What you see on your screen now shows the different effects that you have from each network throughout the region. All of the dots on your screen represent 50 residents in an area, and those dots are either colored orange or purple. The orange dots show areas that would have less jobs accessible if we were to implement the network. The purple dots show areas where customers, residents would have greater access to jobs than they have under the existing network. So on your screen right now, you see our analysis for the limited network. And you can see that by and large, we've got a lot of orange, which means you would see reductions in access, unfortunately, for much of the region, though you do see some areas where we have an increased access to jobs and destinations. Now you can see on your screen that same analysis for the enhanced network. And here you see a lot more purple. That means a lot more people would have better access to jobs and services than they do today, even though the enhanced network has a slightly overall level of reduction in the total amount of transit service provided. Moving forward, before we break, we do want to also tell you about the growth concept. The growth concept tries to answer the question, what would it look like if the region invested more in transit moving forward? Since there's not available funding for something like the growth network today, this should be considered much more of a long-term proposal, but it shows how much better transit service could be if the region chooses to invest in transit. So you can see on your screen right now, as we look at an inside the Watterson view, there's a lot more frequent service, a lot more crosstown connections, and reliable transit service 7 days a week for many more people who need it. As we zoom a little bit further out, we see no levels of reduced coverage in areas outside the Watterson and in southern Indiana, and we actually see increased levels of coverage in new lines that don't exist today, like a 30-minute frequent line, 2 buses an hour, going down the Hurstbourne from Norton Brownsboro all the way to Jefferson Mall, a cross-county connection in the south, just inside the Gene Snyder, that would connect Dixie with Jefferson Mall. Both of these lines would provide significantly better access for many of the new apartment buildings and job centers that have come up in recent decades in the East End and South End, and would be able to provide better connections for riders who are just trying to get places outside the Watterson without forcing them to come all the way into downtown or nearby just to make a transfer. As we look at our analysis of outcomes, we see that the growth network would actually provide more total access to transit than today's network does, and certainly more than the limited and the enhanced network does. Unlike today's network, though, you would have almost double the amount of the population that would have easy access to frequent transit 7 days a week, and significantly more parts of the population that would have access to transit that comes at least every 30 minutes. The outcomes that we would project for a growth concept are pretty significant. We'd see more than a 20% improvement in jobs reachable for the average resident, and big steps forward for many of our communities in need, like average residents in poverty or residents who may not have access to a reliable vehicle. So, what can you do as part of this process? Well, the first and most important thing is TARC needs to hear your voice on what you think of each of these proposals. So our ask more than anything is, please, if you haven't already, take the TARC 2025 Draft Plan Survey. You can access that at ridetarc.org/TARC2025, or you can go via the QR code that's on your screen right now. If you are interested, you can also send an e-blast out to your organization or help us identify a community event to attend or something you might like to invite us to speak to over the next couple of weeks before April 30th. So please take that survey, spread the TARC 2025 draft plans around to anybody in your social circles that you think might need to hear about this and to weigh in. And we'll be back out in communication with the community very soon after April 30th to let you know what the next steps are. So thank you very much for your time today, and we'll look forward to talking to you soon.